Now, Mel Ginever was just 19 when she died from meningitis B in March 2022, after doctors dismissed her symptoms as simply being a boring virus. Because of that, the treatment that could have saved her was delayed, and the coroner concluded that her death was contributed to by neglect.
So hard to hear that, isn't it, for her parents, Mel and Phil, who are here with us, and we're going to talk to them in just a moment. But first, here's Mia's story.
Mel Ginever had just celebrated her 19th birthday. A healthy and happy young woman looking forward to a career in design and a bright future. But just 2 months later, she fell ill with aches and pains, a sore throat and headaches. After 5 days with flu-like symptoms, Mia was admitted to hospital where the doctor diagnosed her with what was referred to as a boring virus and discharged. Just hours later, she returned. By now, she was vomiting, had a rash, a stiff neck and was noticeably delirious. These are the telltale signs of a serious infection. But 4 other medical professionals agreed with the first diagnosis, including a registrar who once again told her family it was viral. Eventually, antibiotics were given 8 hours after the teenager had arrived at hospital. But it was too late. 2 days later, Mia died of severe swelling on the brain. In her report, the coroner described Mia's medical care as lamentable and later said if she'd been treated 3 hours earlier, she would have survived.
We're now joined by Mia's parents, Mel and Phil Ginever, and also by Dr. Amir. Dr. Amir, we'll come to you shortly, but Phil, Mel, come to you first. I mean, what you've been through is just incredible. And as we always say, when people like yourself come on this show, you're doing this in honour of Mia, which is just so inspiring. Yeah. But if you don't mind, can you take us back to that day? I mean, to be referred to as just a boring virus, many of us will have been in with our family members into the hospital. That day, just 2 years ago, you go into the hospital, she's got this virus. What happens, Mel? Or Phil?
Well,
Phil.
Well, I think to be fair to the doctor that saw her, I think he was trying to be a little bit flippant and light-hearted on the first presentation when we took Mia to hospital. When I took Mia to hospital on that Sunday lunchtime, and, you know, they gave us some IV fluids.
And was it because, it wasn't, just to be clear, because they were saying that meningitis was a boring old virus. It's because she was presenting with extremely high temperatures. And they attributed to it in that way that people do, sometimes the medical profession do as well, where they say, don't worry about a thing, it's just a cold, you're worrying over nothing. It was within that context, wasn't it?
Exactly, that, Kate, yeah, definitely. And, you know, they gave us some safety netting at the end of it to say, come back if things get a little bit worse, which they clearly did. And,
so, so in the afternoon then, Mia got considerably worse, and we're giving her the maximum dose of paracetamol and ibuprofen, which they had asked us to do. She was starting to get a little bit delirious. She was having struggle walking. So her sister ran her a bath, and she was in the bath and noticed these small red spots, and I did the normal glass test.
Dr. Hilary Jones glass test, yeah.
Absolutely, and that's where I remember from when our children were babies, learning about that. So did the glass test, and so we rang A&E again, and they said, come back up. But when we got there and we represented at 9 o'clock that evening, Mia couldn't even get out of the car. We had to get a wheelchair. I mean, that's how poorly she was. Her headache, she was being sick. And then we sat in the corridor for 3 hours until we could go through, and they continued to give her intravenous fluids and paracetamol. But Mia had represented with a news score of 5, which meant they should have triggered the sepsis 6 pathway straight away and given her antibiotics.
Right. So that's what could have...
It would have definitely, it would have saved her.
We've had independent...
The independent medical expert at the coroner's inquiry clearly identified that. The hospital have they have admitted that she should have been given antibiotics. And
they've identified it as 3 hours, haven't they? That if she'd had these antibiotics 3 hours before?
Yeah, so we represented at 9. It was 2 o'clock in the morning by the time we saw the registrar. I asked him to give her antibiotics and he refused. He said it was viral. I asked him, I said, what harm will it do? And he said, because it's viral. I showed him the rash. He said the rash was viral. And what the independent medical expert had said is even if she'd been given antibiotics up until 2 o'clock in the morning, she would have survived.
You know, there was this...
And they didn't give them till 5 o'clock, so...
And you, of course, with your first visit, was many, many hours before as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But even at that late stage. I mean, before we come to Dr. Amir about that whole process, that must just make it so difficult for you to deal with the grief and the loss, which would be almost impossible to bear anyway. But that, what might have been.
Definitely, we bear a guilt every day.
Yeah.
You know, it's just...
Mia asked me to not let her die. So, you carry that.
And again, you know, it's the whole thing about a natural order of things. To lose a child is you know, isn't a natural order of anything. You know, she was just starting out in life, post-COVID, you know, everything, she's going on holidays, planned holidays. She was looking to start, you know, work as an interior designer.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's the whole thing is, you know, what she could have contributed to life, I think, is the hardest thing for us.
That's the biggest loss.
There is nothing you should have done. You absolutely shouldn't feel guilty. I completely get your mindset when you think, if only, and could I have fought harder? Could I have done something differently? Dr. Amir, I mean, you've been on the other side of this. Busy A&E, busy ward, busy doctors, an endless stream of people with viruses coming in who all fear they might have something more serious. But even with that, this is heartbreaking, isn't it?
This is incredibly heartbreaking, and you mustn't feel guilty. You know, you put your trust in the healthcare professionals, and it's nothing you have done. And I always say, certainly when I train my GPs as well as a GP trainer, I say when a patient's in a room with you, it's their time and you have to give them your whole attention. If you're not well enough or fit enough, or you feel the pressure is too much to give them that, you shouldn't be there. And that's what it comes down to me. And in my work as a GP, and I was talking to you about this, if I get a whiff of meningitis in a child or an adult, you know, with the symptoms that they may present with, as well as sending them to hospital, I have to give them intramuscular injections of antibiotics before they go.
Wow.
So it's really, really important that if people think someone's got meningitis, healthcare professionals, it should trigger the pathway, as you say, but they should give antibiotics immediately. OK,
so you mentioned, didn't you, and I referenced Dr. Hilary Jones, who, for those of us who've been around a long time in breakfast television, will remember the glass test. If you could just explain that for younger viewers, and also the other symptoms we should look out for.
So meningitis itself is an infection of the lining of the brain and spinal cord. It can be caused by viruses, but also bacteria. And one of the most common bacteria is this meningococcal B bacteria, which can live harmlessly in lots of people's throats, but once it gets past the defences, which doesn't happen often, it can get into the bloodstream and into the brain and spinal cord area. So the typical symptoms of meningitis are fever, headaches, photophobia, so that hurting to look at the light, a stiff neck, they just can't move their neck at all, they hold themselves completely rigid, flu-like symptoms like muscle aches, but also this rash, and we call it a non-blanching rash, and it comes up as depending on the colour of your skin. On paler skin, it's a red or deep purple rash, and it can appear dark purple and brown on darker skin. And the key thing is, if you've got a glass, roll it over the skin, and the spots shouldn't go away. They tend to go, if it's a viral type rash, they do go away.
Right, so if you put a bit of pressure from the glass, look through, and the spots have gone, that's a virus. Is that right?
Well, it's not a meningococcal rash.
Right.
The other thing you can do if you don't have a glass is just stretch the skin around the spot and see if it goes away. And if it doesn't, you must either call 999 or go and take them to see a healthcare professional. Sepsis is slightly different. Sepsis is caused by an infection, and it's when your body has an abnormal or dangerous reaction to that infection. So meningococcal septicemia is the ongoing effects of meningitis. And your immune system not only tries to fight off the infection, it starts fighting your own healthy tissues as well. And you get this abnormal reaction throughout your body, and you can get little blood clots forming in blood vessels which block block the flow of blood to your organs and can cause organ failure as well.
Now, Phil and Mel, I mean, you know, as we said at the start, you know, one of the greatest things we can do for family members that we lose is honour them in everything we do. And one of the things that you're doing, which I think is incredible, is creating awareness for the vaccine. Tell us a little bit about that, Mel.
So when this vaccine, meningitis B, is only given to children in the UK who were born after 2015.
Right.
We weren't even aware that there was another meningitis vaccine. Our children were fully vaccinated with the meningitis vaccine that was available when our children were young. This vaccine is available, but not on the NHS, and people just need to be aware of that. You can get it privately. It could be cost prohibitive. It's not that cheap. It's £110 a dose. You have to have 2 doses. But what we are campaigning for is that it's made more widely available for, you know, and for people to be aware of it.
Just on that very quickly, I mean, this vaccine, should it be more widely available? And are the NHS looking at something like this?
They are. So at the moment, it's available for children or babies aged 8 weeks. And they get it at 8 weeks, 16 weeks, and then at 1 year. And that is because meningitis B is particularly more common and dangerous in young babies under 1. There is a peak there, and again, between 1 and 4. But there is a second peak in adolescents and teenagers. They're balancing the effect of the cost-effectiveness of the vaccine with that, because that peak in teenagers isn't as high as babies. But I agree, I think it should be widely available, as this case highlights. It is available privately, but it is expensive. But the JCVI are looking at whether that vaccine might be used in older children and see whether it can clear that virus.
Dr. Amir, thank you. And more importantly, Phil and Mel, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And our thoughts are with you. And it's only been 2 years, and you know, it's so brave of you to come onto this show, share your story, and remind people that a vaccine is available to try and save future lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you
much.
for having us.
Thank you. And thank you to Dr. Amir as well.